for us who are falling in this chronic stress state, a lot of the guys you have on your podcast, we're always in this hyper aroused state where eventually our adrenals stop. Adrenal fatigue, I always give the analogy, is kind of like a diabetic, right? So you produced so much cortisol because you've been in this chronically stressed state. Eventually, it actually starts to go low. Stage 1, you get the cortisol spike, maybe it stays a little bit elevated. Stage 2, a chronically elevated stress state. So cortisol is really high. Stage 3, you're fatigued all the time. I'm wired all the time. I feel anxious, but I'm so tired and I have to rely on a cup of coffee, multiple cups of coffee, very flat, fatigued levels of energy. And then there's even a stage 4, which is complete like adrenal failure, but wired and tired is really the feeling of adrenal fatigue.
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next podcast guest back to the studio. She was on episode 49. She's the host of the Scheer Madness podcast. She's the CEO of Rachel Scheer Nutrition. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Rachel Scheer.
Mike, thank you for having me back. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. It's been, 3 years?
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years?
It has 3 and change, yep. So we were at a different studio the last time you were here. And I appreciate you coming back. I know we've been trying to line this up for a little while now. Too busy schedules sometimes can be difficult, even though we're in the same city. But so since episode 49, the last 3 years, before we get into some kind of the new topics and things health and nutrition and fitness related that we're going to talk about, give us an update on what you've been up to.
Head down, grinding quite a bit. My focus has really been on my mission in functional medicine. I think last time I was on, I shared a little bit of my story, my health issues, and what I created, which was a functional medicine nutrition practice to help other people get to the root cause of their health issues. And since then, we have just grown exponentially in such an incredible way. I'm so grateful for it. But in a way that's taken up the majority of my time. We have a few coaches. We probably have around, 12 people on my team now and continuing to grow, servicing people all throughout the United States, even a bit internationally with the functional medicine lab testing that we do. Speaking. That's been something that's been new for me.
Do you do that, monthly? Do you do it often?
Yeah, I would never say that I'm a speaker because it's not my full-time job. Even like podcasting, I'd be like, okay, I'm a podcaster, but it's not like my number one thing that I do. Like really being a functional medicine dietitian is my main zone of genius, along with, running my entire business since I'm the CEO. But I've gotten a lot more speaking opportunities, and I think part of it was because speaking scared me to death for the longest time. Even podcasting used to scare me. Yeah, I'm incredibly introverted. I used to be so nervous. I think even the first podcast we did, I was still like just getting comfortable with like being on camera and speaking. And you would listen to that episode and you'd be like, I never would have thought that. Yeah. And like I can tap in and turn it on, but it's like the nerves are there. But recently, there's been a lot more talks about entrepreneurship and business growth, and just because of a lot of the success that my business has seen. So often it's usually about gut health, taking a gut-centric approach to healing, root cause approach, and then I do a lot of business talks too about entrepreneurship for women, how to use your story to build an incredible brand, because that's really what I did, is I talked about my story, my own healing, my own pain, and I took that and I turned it outward.
Yeah.
And I shared that. And that's what built my brand. It built my business. And then now I've had a lot of women who go through even my practice. They get the healing that they want. Like I've had a client who had Hashimoto's, an autoimmune condition, came in, she couldn't lose weight for the life of her. Western medicine completely failed her. And she was just on medications for her thyroid issue. She couldn't lose weight because Hashimoto's affects your thyroid, which affects your body's ability to lose weight. We were able to help her heal and reverse a lot of her Hashimoto's. And then, for her, she was like, I want to help other women. I want to help them do this too. And it's been cool because as my business has grown, it's always been like, what do people need and want from me? Like I never sought out even to do business coaching, but now I've stepped in to actually help women now take their own journey, their own stories, even become certified in nutrition, functional nutrition, not like what I do as a registered dietitian in functional medicine, but more functional nutrition, learning about gut health, thyroid, hormonal balance, and then using their story to build a brand so then they can help other people, you know, heal and reach their most optimal health. And I think that's what's really, really incredible now with where I'm at is it's helping women and men too, but I definitely have a lot more women, but create this healing and reach their optimal health. And then they're like, holy shit, I want to help other people realize what it's like to actually feel good and then turn that even into a business.
Yeah. Have you brought, are some of the coaches clients of yours or former clients that have turned into coaches or?
I had one that was a previous client and then turned into a coach, but I only bring on registered dietitians.
Yeah.
So often we don't have a lot of registered dietitians going through my program,
Sure.
maybe every so often.
Yeah. How many coaches does your company have at this point other than you?
3, bringing on 2 more.
Oh, wow. And so I guess like for a prospective client, what is the process when they come to you and say, hey, you know, here are my issues? Like what is I know it's not cookie cutter, everybody's different, but is there kind of a standard protocol that you use to identify what testing to do, or do you do all the same testing, or how does it work?
Yeah, we have a base testing bundle that we do, you know, and what I explained to everybody is, you know, the first step is really getting to what is off and asking the question, why is it off? So functional medicine, you could say, is the medicine of why, and Western medicine is the medicine of what. So in Western medicine, they'll do very basic testing. And then based off of that testing, they'll really just rule out if there's anything that's a major disease. Maybe they'll give you the diagnosis of IBS, an autoimmune condition, like for gut issues. If you have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, they'll look for anything major, you know, sometimes do colonoscopy, endoscopy. But if all of that checks out normal, especially for the people who more so have chronic health conditions, think like overweight, hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, gut issues, depression, where it is really lifestyle based, these people are really just left managing the symptoms, right? They're given a medication or they're just brushed off. You know, we see that quite a bit with women who go to the doctor and they're like, I know something's off. I don't feel good. Maybe they feel like they have a hormone issue. They're like, I have terrible PMS. They run testing and then they're like, okay, everything looks normal. We can put you on birth control. And that's really like their options. Yeah. And they feel stuck and like no one's really taking them seriously. And that's what happened to me with Western medicine and all of my gut issues, where I was even suggested that I had my entire large intestine removed because of all of my own bloating, inability to use the restroom, and everything came back, you could say, normal. There was no Crohn's, colitis, nothing was diseased, where Western medicine really does shine, right, when it comes to a lot of those major issues. But it was more so just, I had IBS, I had irritable bowel syndrome. My gut was irritable, so let's put her on laxatives, let's put her on an antidepressant because of her mood. Let's put her on birth control, you know, for her hormones, thyroid medication. And I was put on all these medications and then just got worse and worse and worse. So kind of coming back to your question though, about like our approach, we do a different type of testing. We have a base bundle, but it's looking at everything in terms of not just the selected area based off of where their symptoms. For example, if you feel like you have bloating or constipation or diarrhea, we're not just going to only look at maybe things that align with the gut. We want to look at the full picture. So it's about 40 pages of lab testing that we do. It's going to be looking at things like your gut microbiome, which even if you go to a gastroenterologist, they won't look at your gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome is really the encompass of all of the bacteria that live in your gut, both good and bad bacteria. So probiotics, we call these the good guys. They're very beneficial for our health. And then there can be other microbes that are in our gut, gut pathogens that are more disease causing. There is fungus. Fungus can overgrow, something called candida overgrowth. There can be parasites, and when we do this stool test and we can look at someone's microbiome, we can really identify, what is off. And then also look at things like, is there low digestive enzymes? Is there any leaky gut? And it's a much different picture than just doing a colonoscopy, endoscopy, and some basic blood work. But we don't just look at that. We want to look at hormones, how somebody's metabolizing their hormones, so we can identify why you maybe have a hormonal imbalance. And in Western medicine, we look at, it's not just if you have a hormone imbalance and here's a medication to fix it, it's why are your hormones off, right? And it can be because you have gut microbiome imbalances. Actually, you can have a type of bacteria in your gut that is overgrown, and it produces this enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, and you reabsorb estrogen back into your body. So part of the reason why you're gaining weight and you have PMS as a woman is actually because of your gut bacteria. So it's really cool to see how it's connected. Hormones, adrenals, micronutrients. So if you're deficient in anything, looking at things like, of course, cholesterol, inflammation, blood sugar, insulin resistance, and then even toxins, environmental toxins. And these are often missed in Western medicine, but it's a huge root cause for, neurological issues, even anxiety, depression. It's a huge root cause for autoimmune conditions. So people who have Hashimoto's, ulcerative colitis, because it's triggering a lot of immune upregulation and inflammatory response. So it's a different kind of testing, and we're really looking at these different body systems and how it's all interconnected. Basically, everything is influencing everything in the body, with looking at the person's nutrition. What are they eating? What are they putting into their body? What are their stress levels like? What medications are they taking? What are their supplements that they're taking? What medications are they on? And also getting to know what their goals are. What do they want to create for themselves? How do they want to feel every single day? What do they want to get rid of with how they're currently feeling? So we take all of this into consideration when we see somebody coming in. And then my coaches and me, because we're an interdisciplinary team, we're all working together, and all of our clients who come in, we're able to create more of a customized plan and say, okay, this person, right, who had the high estrogen levels that's causing the weight gain and the PMS, a lot of it's coming from the gut, but what caused her gut to be off? Okay, it's her diet. And we correct the systems in the order that it occurs.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guys, I want to take a second to talk about ads. And this is not an ad. This is me talking about the ads. I know that, sometimes we get comments of people bitching about the ads. There's too many ads, or they're too long, or what have you. And I want to clear two things up, which is, number one is that our team's ability to bring you guests and bring them in, and the accommodations and the entire process that it takes to produce these shows to the level with which we do requires funding, and the sponsors give us an ability to bring these shows to you. So while I understand that everybody wants zero ads and everything bunched together and what have you, this is how we bring this show to you. We're a very small team. We're very fortunate to be able to do it, but we do still have to pay bills and bring that to you. So keep that in mind. That's the first point. And the second point is that I can assure you with 100% accuracy is that there is not a sponsor or a product that I talk about on here that isn't something that I use. Okay, that I either regularly use or always use or have used, and I refuse to budge on that. Okay, so we get offers for sponsors regularly that get turned down because it's not stuff that I use or would use. So keep that in mind. Have a little bit of flexibility in terms of our ads, and realize that they're products that I believe in, that I stand behind, and they're what make this show possible. So if you support these advertisers, these sponsors, that is supporting the show. Thank you. What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. It seems, I mean, when you explain it, it seems almost like common sense. Like, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
Yet,
but we don't.
But yeah, I mean, Western medicine is terrible that way. I mean, especially with even stuff like joint pain. You know, it's like, oh, operate on it. You know, or a lot of times it's like stretches or doing certain mobility routines will fix it. And the first thing they want to do is put you under the knife and replace your knee or your hip or whatever, when it's just, you've got an imbalance in your lower back and you just need to stretch a certain way, you know, for a 6-week period and it'll fix it. But I'm curious, I mean, it seems like if you look kind of historically at the standard American diet, even, you know, 100 years ago, 60 years ago, sugar and wheat and carbs even were simpler and different than they are now. Whether it's, you know, genetically modified stuff or, you know, some of the pesticides and herbicides that are being used on some of the products, you know, it seems like there's kind of almost a perfect storm of different factors that are creating this even worse and worse food. Is there, from your experience, kind of some of the worst culprits food-wise that people eat that maybe they don't realize are bad? Or is there kind of a recurring theme that you see with a lot of people that come in when it's a diet-related issue where there's things that are the most common culprits?
I mean, most people who come in are dealing with some degree of chronic inflammation in the body, right? So chronic inflammation really is the root cause of most disease. And when I talk about disease in my practice, I call it dis-ease. So just an imbalance in the body that can lead to all of these other different health conditions. And then the second one I see quite a bit is insulin resistance, which both of those typically come back to lifestyle. Not all the time, but most of the time it does. And, you know, with our diet, I agree with you. You know, the diet has definitely shifted over these last few years. And even right now, like meat is something that is demonized quite a bit, right? And I think where we really ran into issues is just us as humans messing with so much of the food. You know, like a lot of the meat now that we do eat, it is highly processed. Like there's hormones, antibiotics injected into them. They're confined in cages. They're grain fed and sometimes even fed candy with a lot of these cattle. Like seriously, there's videos of showing cattle being fed like candy and sugar basically, because their goal is how can we fatten up these cows as fast as possible so we can slaughter them so we can, of course, make a product out of it. Yeah. And, you know, the meat's not the problem. It's how we're processing a lot of this food for sure, you know, and I think most of the standard American diet, at least 36% consists of industrial seed oils and sugar, which are very nutrient poor. They're calorie dense, but they're nutrient poor. So, you know, a good third amount of the calories in most people's diets are missing the key nutrients that we need. You know, and we do this testing and we'll see quite a bit deficiencies in omega-3 fatty acids. That's probably the most common deficiency. I'd say about 9 out of 10 people who we run their omega-3s and omega-6s are low in omega-3s, EPA and DHA, which are main anti-inflammatory fatty acids, which are really important too for our mental health because they cross the blood-brain barrier. I always describe it to people as like our blood-brain barrier is like a bouncer at a club. And like your omega-3s get to go like the front of the line and they get to go like right in. Omega-6s though as well too, but these are pro-inflammatory fats, arachidonic acid and linoleic acid, and they're not bad, but we see a 10-fold increase in the levels of arachidonic acid compared to EPA, our main anti-inflammatory fat. So what this means is people are getting way too much of these pro-inflammatory fats, omega-6s. and not enough of those omega-3s, which you can get a good amount of omega-3s from, kind of going back to the meat, like grass-fed and finished, high-quality meat, but it's very devoid in that and actually high in omega-6s when it's a lot more processed and grain-fed. An analogy I used to actually give a lot of my clients is, think of somebody who eats a diet that's mainly like bread and pasta, and they're on a lot of medications, and like what their body composition looks like. That's the cow that is fed like grain and given all these hormones. And then they're very sedentary too. Not going to be in the most ideal health. Yeah. Versus somebody who eats maybe lots of fruits and veggies and is like active, like that body composition is going to be very different. That's the cow that's going to be grass fed and finished. And then we're eating their meat, and then it's affecting our health. So it's not only we are what we eat, but we are what our food eats as well. So that's a really big one. And then that can cause a lot of this inflammation and a deficiency in even DHA, one of those main omega-3 fats, has been shown to cause a shrinkage in our hippocampus in the brain, which plays a huge role in memory. So now we see earlier onset of things like dementia, Alzheimer's, all coming even back to our diet and causing this inflammation throughout our entire body.
With that, the DHA, I mean, fish oil, are you a fan of that, or do you prefer to get it from food? Like with, I guess, the omega-3s and DHA and stuff like that, is it okay to pop good fish oil, or is it always preferable to get it from real food?
I always say real food is going to be the most important option for us to go for, but you can get it from supplementation, and the truth is most people aren't getting enough from their diet. And what we really see most people are deficient in, even more than the DHA, is typically that EPA, fatty acid, because we'll measure that ratio of EPA to arachidonic acid. And the ratio should be typically 2 to 10, or the number when we create that ratio. And for most people, we're seeing well over 100 with it. Wow. So we can redo that ratio or improve it by essentially decreasing the levels of arachidonic acid. So this is going to be trying to eat less inflammatory foods, industrial seed oils, vegetable oils, which anytime you're eating foods that are processed, they're probably having a good amount of industrial seed oils and vegetables, the chips, all of the packaged type foods that we eat, and even salad dressings quite a bit too. If you read the back, you'll see, canola oil and all these different types of oils. And even sometimes too, you're getting like marinated, steak or chicken, and I'm getting it from like Whole Foods. And I'm like, why is there canola oil in this? And you just start to realize it's literally in like everything that you're eating. So once you start paying attention to that, there's like a freak out. I see people go through, they're like, there's canola oil and seed oils and everything. And you're like, yeah. But it's just starting to notice that and like actually read the back of like labels, and then being able to reduce that amount. And it can make a big difference just starting to pay attention to that, and then increasing your amount of omega-3s, which can be from eating higher quality animal protein, grass-fed and finished, ideally local and organic. That's going to be always the best. And then also too, like you can supplement with an omega-3 fatty acid. You just want to make sure it's a high quality omega-3. Most of the fish oils that where people get a lot of like burping after, they can actually be rancid. So
is there a brand that you'd recommend?
We use Metagenics quite a bit. It's pharmaceutical grade. I've never had issues with that. And we do see a really good improvement when we can supplement with about 4 grams, which is a high dose of EPA for people who are low in their omega-3s, and then their levels of arachidonic acid are elevated.
Are you familiar with Nordic Naturals?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
I think that one's good. I haven't dove into that one too much.
Metagenics is the one.
Metagenics, yeah.
And you take 4 grams?
4 grams of EPA.
Is that what you take?
I take 2 now, but for most people who are deficient,
I gotcha.
4 grams is usually pretty effective at bringing those levels up.
Yeah, okay. What other foods are high in EPA and DHA other than grass-fed and finished beef?
Wild caught fish, salmon, mackerel, You can get it from a little bit from baby shrimp too, caviar.
Really?
So for anyone who wants to be fancy, a little bit of caviar. But it's like nobody's like probably eating an abundance of these foods. So we see really good omega-3 levels for people who are more coastal quite a bit.
Yeah.
But on the other side, we tend to also see high levels of mercury, which is a heavy metal that we also test for. So there's kind of like pros and cons. So sometimes tuna, for example, can be pretty high in mercury, which is neurotoxic, crosses our blood-brain barrier, and is not good for our health, really impacts our gut health. So wild-caught fish, salmon, mackerel, that can be okay. A little bit of sometimes mercury can be found in mackerel, baby shrimp, caviar, and then outside of that, there's some plant-based options. Walnuts can be a good source, pumpkin seeds. However, I always say to people, you'd have to be like beer bonging, like walnuts and pumpkin seeds to be able to get enough that your body really needs. So you really do need to be getting it from typically animal protein from fish, and then maybe adding in a supplementation.
I got you. With the gut being so connected to everything, it seems, medications are the most prevalent they've ever been in our society. Mm-hmm. One thing that I've seen, I guess recently with, especially like in the veteran space with PTSD and depression, but also, a lot of these guys have, a ton of injuries, and so they're prescribed a lot of these, opioid-based, both opioid-based medications as well as like SSRIs for depression, which both of those things in terms of what it does to your stomach is pretty significant. Can you kind of walk through the process of what taking medications that spike dopamine and serotonin and kind of wash out the receptors, like how that wreaks havoc and that process, and then how to heal that kind of stuff, and like if you come across a patient where that's the case, where they've been on heavy medications in both of those realms for years maybe, how would you approach kind of tackling healing that?
Yeah. Some of the medications that we see are the most detrimental to the gut microbiome are, of course, antibiotics, just because it wipes out most of your gut flora, NSAIDs in particular. So pain medications can play a pretty big role. They break down the gut lining. And this is why even sometimes like stomach ulcers are pretty common in people who are taking pain medications. But we can see more of a breakdown of the gut lining, which can lead to something called intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And when that's happening, we can get more food, bacteria, and toxins leaking into our bloodstream, stimulating more of that immune and inflammatory response, which can actually, in the long run, lead to the onset of an autoimmune condition, and can also lead to neurological issues. Brain fog is actually one of the most common symptoms of leaky gut that we see in my practice. Skin issues quite a bit. But also, too, our gut lining is really important for our microbiome health. It's actually like a guard from bacteria being able to enter into our bloodstream, but we also see these pain medications can disrupt our microflora. So we can see an overgrowth sometimes in more pathogenic bacteria or bacteria that are more inflammatory to the body. We call these gram-negative bacteria. They produce something called LPS, it's a lipopolysaccharide, and this is more inflammatory to the body, really. And so over time, we start to see this microbiome disruption, or something we called dysbiosis, and this intestinal permeability come about from these pain medications. Antibiotics, proton pump inhibitors, or antacids are actually pretty bad as well too, just because the acid that we produce in our stomach is also first-line defense. So as we are eating food, we're taking something literally outside here and we're putting it into our body. That stomach acid is that first-line defense to kill off a lot of that bacteria. So medications in the long run can be pretty detrimental. Now, SSRIs, right, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, for some people, short-term wise, they can see improvements in their gut health because we're seeing more serotonin, right, being produced. But when someone tries to come off of an SSRI, then we really see a negative downstream effect with our gut health too. And for me, I was even on an SSRI for most of my upbringing. I was put on it when I was 16 years old. And I remember as I was trying to come off of it, not to mention how just awful it was with the withdrawal, but a lot of my gut issues started to flare up. And that's because even a lot of our serotonin that is produced in our gut. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. And what that serotonin does is it actually stimulates our vagus nerve, which is that largest nerve in the body, connects our gut all the way to our brain, and it goes through our heart, and it also connects to all of our other organs. And when somebody has low serotonin, we're not actually stimulating that vagus nerve, and people end up more in that sympathetic state, more of like a fight or flight cortisol reactive state, and the gut actually begins to shut down. So, we start to see some of these downstream effects, but for also to someone who immediately gets on an SSRI, they may be like, hey, my gut feels better because I'm producing more serotonin. But what we also tend to see with people who get on SSRI is they feel better for a little while, and then they start to just kind of feel back to where they were baseline. And then when they try to come off, they feel even worse. And that's because, what's happening is we're shutting these reuptake transports where the serotonin can basically go back home. But as these serotonin molecules are firing on the neurons, there's these enzymes that actually come and can eat them up. So there's an enzyme called MEO, an MEO enzyme, and these are eating up a lot of the serotonin. So we kind of now have less serotonin altogether. And then as soon as we open back up that reuptake transporter and serotonin can go back in, we actually have much less. So we're quote unquote depleted in serotonin, and that will really negatively affect our gut health.
All the time that I've been alive, the U.S. dollar has always been the primary currency, but that may not be the case much longer. China is set to dethrone the dollar, probably sooner than we all think. All of the world's biggest economies are ditching the U.S. dollar for the yuan. Collapsing U.S. currency is causing unprecedented inflation and crashing markets, which you see around us all the time. If that's not enough, it paves the way for the government to take total control over all your money with a new digital dollar. Take control of your savings and don't let your life savings become a casualty of currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer I trust, which is American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. With the finest products, amazing customer service, and a buyback commitment, American Hartford Gold has a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. American Hartford Gold supports content like the Mic Drop podcast, and it's committed to bringing you the truth, hence supporting my show. Tell them I sent you, and they'll give you up to $5,000 of free silver on your first order. $5,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. Click on the link in the description, or you can call 855-967-1413. That's 855-967-1413. Or you can just text the word DROP, as in mic drop, to 65532. Again, that's 855-967-1413, or text DROP to 65532. Fresh ball fall is upon us, and you need to be in the festive spirit. Light you a candle, get some pumpkin spice, and make sure your balls look nice with the sponsor of today's show, Manscaped. You all know them and love them. You've seen me smell my own device on here. Nature may clear the leaves of their trees, but you'll need Manscaped's help to get you ready for that sweater weather. Get your pants puppies prepared for cuffing season, where the trim is refreshing as a fall breeze, by going to manscaped.com and use the code MicDrop. That's all one word, MicDrop, for 20% off plus free shipping. 20% off plus free shipping. I've been using Manscaped products for several years now. I use all of them, and I use them regularly. It's a 7,000 RPM motor, multifunction on-off switch. It's got a LED spotlight to help you see, because God knows some of us need more help than others. Once you've cleared that driveway, the performance package comes in hot with products to cool you down. You got the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, the Crop Reviver Ball Spray Toner, one to prevent stink and one to clear it up. With soothing aloe vera formula, you can move over pumpkin spice, because fresh balls are the smell of the season. the performance package is really the way to go. It's the 4.0. It caps it off with 2 free gifts, which is boxers and the Shed travel bag. So that's one to hold the Manscaped goodies and one to hold your man goodies. So again, go to manscaped.com and the code is MicDrop, all one word, for 20% off plus free shipping. Would you put opioids in that same category, or are they different? Are they more damaging to the gut in terms of lining, similar to NSAIDs, or are they more similar to antidepressants?
I haven't done a whole lot of research on that one in particular, but I feel like it would be more similar to NSAIDs, at least.
As far as hammering your gut, basically. Yeah. That's fascinating. So with the, I guess the gut being, the central manufacturer of serotonin, what is the process for you guys if somebody comes in and says, or you determine that they've been on a host of medications that has gotten them to that point? What's the best way to heal a gut? Obviously getting off of that stuff, but to repair it once you're off of that, what do you do?
In your spot on, you want to, of course, remove what caused the gut to be off in the first place. Otherwise, we're going to have a really hard time, like, fully healing the gut, which for some people can be a bit of a slow process. I would never advise anybody to just cold turkey come off of a medication. Even for myself, as I was weaning off of the SSRI I was on, it was a long period of time, right? So coming off of that, anything else that's also causing the gut to become off, for most people, it's not just one thing. We do this in-depth look at nutrition, medications, lifestyle, getting these lab tests done, because it's not just, what is the root cause? It's what are the root causes, plural. So oftentimes we'll see medications. Sometimes we'll see a lot of just stress in their life, which, would probably make sense for a lot of these guys who are on those medications anyway. Oftentimes too, for somebody who's struggling with depression or is on, pain medication, they also too maybe don't have the best eating habits because of a lot of that, emotional, physical pain that they're struggling with. So maybe, they cope a little bit with
Slim Jims and Cheetos.
Ordering in food, Grubhub, getting a lot of food that is more inflammatory, sugar, sometimes it's drinking, alcohol is also really bad for our gut, and some people hate hearing that. And, I'm even the person every now and then I'll have like a glass of wine and something like that, but I know it's not good for the gut. And especially when you're trying to heal the gut, it can be really hard to do so when we have a lot of these things in the diet. So one of the things I always communicate to our clients is there's the difference between gut health and gut healing. So when you have gut symptoms, so you're struggling with whether it's constipation, diarrhea, chronic bloating, these are the gut symptoms we tend to see the most, but there can also be, depression, anxiety, mood, low energy, brain fog, like I mentioned earlier with leaky gut, is a big symptom that we see too with gut issues. So you can have gut issues without having gut symptoms, which is what's very interesting for a lot of people to understand. So that's why the testing is really necessary, because you could be somebody coming in and like, I don't have gut symptoms. I feel like my gut is awesome. But maybe you have, skin issues like psoriasis, and you're chronically fatigued all the time, and you have depression. And then we do the gut microbiome test on you, and you have a lot of dysbiosis, bacteria overgrowth. You have leaky gut and your gut's inflamed. Then we want to get you started on a gut healing protocol. So one, removing the things that cause the gut to be off and really identifying that. But then two, sometimes it's treating now the damage as well. So if there's a lot of bacteria overgrowth, we want to be able to eliminate or eradicate a lot of that bacteria overgrowth. So for some people, they can even get something called SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, where some bacteria actually migrates up into the small intestine. Very common symptom of that is a lot of bloating and distension. And when you're eating sometimes even healthy foods, if you have SIBO, the bacteria are basically fermenting on a lot of the fibers that you're eating in your diet. So healthy foods now, like broccoli, asparagus, onions, but you're bloated all the time. And a very telltale sign of somebody who has SIBO is they had a really shitty diet and they tried to eat healthy and they added in all these vegetables and fiber and they're like, I feel so bloated. What the heck is happening? Well, your microbiome hasn't developed or you have SIBO because you have to have a certain type of bacteria to break down a lot of these fibers. So if there's bacteria overgrowth, we'll want to treat that. We can do that with antimicrobials, which are basically an herbal antibiotic. In some cases, they use actual antibiotics in Western medicine, but those tend to have more side effects and negative effects in the long run. There are some antibiotics that are just localized to the gut, but we like to take more of an herbal approach. So things like oil of oregano, berberine, allicin, which is a component of garlic. These are natural antibiotics that we can put somebody on, which will lower some of the inflammatory bacteria, lower maybe even gut pathogens. If someone has a parasite, we're treating that. And then step 2 is repair. So repairing that gut lining. If there's inflammation, if the gut lining has been broken down, we want to keep out still the things that were causing the breakdown, but we can add in some good gut healing supplements. So things like L-glutamine, omega-3 fatty acids, zinc is really beneficial, colostrum, bone broth. Actually, even peptides can be really beneficial for healing the gut lining. There's one we use quite a bit called BPC 157. You may have heard of that one before.
Because it's Wolverine.
It's really good for healing in general, but when taken orally as a supplement, it's really good for healing the gut lining.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I excuse my ignorance. I thought all peptides were like sub-Q injectables, but so they have a BPC 157 that's oral. That's cool.
Yeah. If you use it as an injection and like let's say you have an injury, it works a bit more localized, but if you do it orally, it works pretty well for healing the gut.
So inject it into the gut then, right?
No.
I'm kidding.
But yeah, so eradicating the bacteria overgrowth. So we call this more of like the removal phase, removing what caused it to be off, eradicating the core bacteria overgrowth, restoring the gut lining. And then after we've done that, which is really the majority of the healing phase, there's a transition more into restoring. So we've done a lot of, protocols to get rid of bacteria. Well, now we want to build a very robust and healthy microbiome, work more on gut diversity. So now it's actually switching a little bit to focus more on adding fibers in, adding things like prebiotics, probiotics. So prebiotics are going to be more of those fibrous type foods, which often when you're healing the gut, someone may not tolerate very well. They may get a lot of bloating. But as we fix the bacteria issue or the overgrowth, you should be able to tolerate those better. And then we can slowly add in these prebiotics, probiotics, work a bit more on diet, because diet's going to play the biggest role at the end of the day in your gut microbiome. Like we can do a bunch of different supplements, but if we don't actually eat a good healthy diet, lots of different, actually polyphenols are awesome for the gut microbiome. So any kind of like bright colored fruits and vegetables. So like pomegranate seeds, blueberries like I had for breakfast today, leafy greens, arugula. So all of the bright colored fruits and vegetables are very high in polyphenols. And these polyphenols work like a probiotic. And they feed different types of bacteria in our gut microbiome, continuing to increase that diversity. And that's how we actually can fully heal the gut. It's like the slow transition from gut healing to gut health. And most of what we see online on social media where people now talk about gut health, because now it's sexy. And, when I got into this, how long ago was this? 7 years ago when I was struggling with my gut issues, like gut health wasn't sexy. It's like, no one wants to talk about poop or bloating and this kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, cool. Now everybody's interested in like gut microbiome and gut health. But what we see online is really more so focused on gut health versus gut healing.
Yeah. It's an important distinction. And it seems like you can't have gut health until it's healed, really. And I would imagine that that's a common mistake that people make is they go right to the gut health protocol without fixing the problem and the root cause first. Is that normal?
Yeah. We break it down into different tiers of quote unquote gut dysfunction. So most everybody is going to have, tier 1, which is going to be low diversity in their gut.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of inflammation, and not always, but low diversity, since we do microbiome tests on all of our clients, and probably too, it's like the kind of people who are coming to us already have things that are off, but I'd say literally everybody has low diversity.
Yeah.
And part of that also goes back to, right, yes, the foods that we're eating, but also like our soil is very different. Like it's devoid in a lot of the key minerals and micronutrients, which also plays a massive role in our gut microbiome. So everybody, right, has basically low diversity in our gut. And when I say diversity, it's the abundance of different types of good bacteria that are living in our gut. And there's a lot of connections between the more diverse our gut is, the more optimal health, where low diversity is connected with obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, mental health issues, autoimmune conditions. So everybody can work on diversity, but then there's these other tiers of gut dysfunction. You know, tier 2 is more intestinal permeability and a breakdown, where someone maybe actually has symptoms, neurological issues. The brain fog that we talked about. Tier 3 is maybe where there's some bacteria overgrowth that's actually taking place. And then tier 4 is where somebody actually has a full-blown autoimmune condition, which is ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, Hashimoto's, which we don't think about Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid issue, being a gut issue, but our immune system is also based in our gut.
Yeah.
So it depends on each person. I think you can work on gut health, but if you notice things actually getting worse for you instead of better, that's a sign right there that you probably have something that's off and you need to more so focus on gut healing.
Yeah. When you talk about neurological issues and brain fog, how would you test for and diagnose that, other than if somebody's just like, I'm more forgetful than I used to be, or like how do you evaluate that?
There's not really a good criteria to evaluate the person, like on brain fog, neurological. Like we're taking their word, and what they're telling us is like their big symptoms. But it is interesting because we've had people come in who, like they're like, I'm fine, like I feel great. And then we do the testing and we still see a lot of these things that are off in their gut, and we work on it. And then they feel 10 times better. And they're like, I didn't even know that I felt bad. They just didn't know what it was like to feel good. And I think that so many people are living at this baseline of what they feel like is good, but they don't actually truly know what it's like to feel good.
Yeah. Wow. That's kind of sad. Mm-hmm. Artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
If there's a vice that I have as I sit here drinking it, it's things with artificial.
What's that one? Starburst?
It's a Starburst flavored C4, which has like
that's like the worst one. C4.
Is it?
No. Well,
I mean, they're all terrible.
They're
right?
all terrible. C4 was like my very first ever pre-workout I took.
Yeah.
I remember like back in college, I was just getting into like weightlifting and bodybuilding, and someone was like, try this C4 pre-workout. And I took it, and when you get like the tingles the first time you're taking a pre-workout, I had like a whole freak out because I was driving. I was like, stop the car. Yeah. I think what is happening? And it's very high in caffeine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Artificial sweeteners, there's a lot of mixed studies about that for gut health. A lot of the studies have been done more so on animals. However, there now is some good studies on humans. So people argument both ways. They're like, that's in a high dose in animals versus humans. But I can speak to a lot of the clients that we've worked with, and I know for myself too, we tend to see a decrease in people who actually have gut symptoms like bloating when we do remove artificial sweeteners. Yeah. And I'm more so speaking to like sucralose. There's sugar alcohols like xylitol, mannitol, which even when we put somebody on a gut healing diet, these sugar alcohols we know are fermentable to gut bacteria. So I think for people who have poor gut health and are actually dealing with a lot of these chronic gut issues or symptoms, it can exacerbate a lot of that. But I think for people who are pretty healthy, they should be able to tolerate a little bit of it. However, I will say monk fruit, stevia are always going to be the most ideal in terms of gut health. But I mean, any of them, if you Google online, look at side effects, you'll see bloating, constipation, diarrhea is the side effects of a lot of these artificial sweeteners.
Yeah. That makes sense. The caffeine, do you have a position on caffeine? Would you classify it as kind of a similar, like some is okay, but if you're healthy, some, but there's for sure too much, or what would you?
I'd say like most of my advice, besides like obvious foods like seed oils, processed foods like that, I'm never really like, don't ever do this. It's bad. It's good. Like there are certain things that can be tolerated and be totally fine for health. I am all for caffeine. But if somebody is dealing with a ton of adrenal issues and stress in their life and insomnia, or even a lot of poor gut health, overdoing the caffeine can make things worse.
Yeah.
I know for myself, like a while back, I struggled with a bit of like burnout, and caffeine for me like exacerbated all of the issues that I was dealing with. And we'll see a lot of people who have adrenal fatigue, especially, with the way things are nowadays. We're overworking. There's not a whole lot of, time where we connect with ourselves, with family. So much of our worth is put in the doing and our jobs, how much money we're making. And I think, I know for myself, I think women too are just a bit more prone to reaching burnout because, running a business, it is a bit more of a masculine thing to do for sure. So I've had to find my own balance. But I think, with caffeine, there's like that benefit. And then there's like the negative. So like in small amounts, like 100 to 200 milligrams, like it can be beneficial, but anything above that, I think we see more of a net return. And I know that even true for myself. I'm like 1 cup of coffee, I feel awesome. 2 cups of coffee, I feel like more will make me feel better than now I just feel like anxiety ridden.
Yeah. What adrenal fatigue, that's something that similarly is talked a little bit more about. Can you talk about what it is, why it's detrimental, and I guess most importantly, how you identify it?
Yeah. So adrenal fatigue, I always give the analogy, is kind of like a diabetic, right? So you produced so much cortisol because you've been in this, sympathetic state, chronically stressed state, where your cortisol has been chronically elevated for a long period of time, where eventually it actually starts to go low. Very similar to that diabetic whose insulin levels and blood sugar levels are chronically elevated from overeating. And then eventually their pancreas kind of gives out on producing more insulin. So adrenal fatigue's a version of that. In functional medicine, we call it HPA axis dysfunction. So HPA, hypothalamus, pituitary adrenals. Our adrenals produce cortisol and DHEA. And in acute stressors, the stress response is very beneficial. So think of like working out. That's a very beneficial stressor. Your cortisol goes up, you're in more of like a fight or flight response, but then after you're done working out, your body recovers, and from that small stressor, your body actually builds up some resilience and you're stronger. Ice baths, those are something that I do each day. It's a short-term stressor. But it's for us who are falling in this chronic stress state. A lot of the guys you have on your podcast, we're always in this hyper-aroused state where eventually our adrenals stop producing as much cortisol. And there's different stages of it. Stage 1, typically, it's maybe a little bit of some chronic cortisol, but your body recovers quite a bit. It can be more asymptomatic, meaning you get the cortisol spike, maybe it stays a little bit elevated. And then, everything kind of eventually returns back to baseline. Kind of what we'd see more in just the normal acute stressors, but maybe a little bit more elevated, not always symptomatic. Stage 2 of adrenal fatigue is when we're just in that chronically elevated stress state. So cortisol is really high all the time. So typically there's a lot of anxiety here. There's, we can see the gut be a bit more negatively affected too, because we're in that chronically elevated cortisol state. The gut shuts down, so we're not digesting very well. So constipation can be common. Insomnia can be common too, just because of that cortisol that's being produced. And then stage 3 is where we go more on the decline with cortisol. Now it's low. This is the person who's now opposite. They're fatigued all the time. I use the analogies like wired and tired is really the feeling of adrenal fatigue. So I'm wired all the time. I feel anxious, but I'm so tired, and I have to rely on a cup of coffee, multiple cups of coffee, to even feel any sort of energy during the day. And that's because caffeine is going to stimulate a bit of a cortisol response. So we talk about cortisol being bad, right, when it's too high, but it's also not good when it's really low, because it's just going to lead to like very flat, fatigued levels of energy. And then there's even a stage 4, which is complete like adrenal failure, but that's not something we really see with my practice.
Yeah. Is it an evaluation, or is there actual like blood testing that you do for that?
Yeah, we do HP access testing, which can be done through the urine or the saliva. So it's testing cortisol levels throughout the day. So we test it upon awakening. We test it about 30 minutes later, test it around noon, midday, in the evening time. And what we should see is a spike in cortisol within 30 minutes of waking up. This is our cortisol awakening response. This happens in correlation to typically with the sun rising. So it's our circadian rhythm. And then we should see a decline in cortisol throughout the day where it's the lowest in the evening time. And then we'll see melatonin pick up in the evening time. And that's our whole circadian rhythm. So somebody who has stage 2 will see cortisol, spike really high in the morning, well above the baseline of where it should be spiking to. And maybe they're getting random spikes during the day, or it's just chronically elevated. And then stage 3, we'll just see more like a flatliner. So just no cortisol production at all.
Yeah. I want to take a second to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is a staunch supporter of this podcast, which is Bub's Naturals. The hat sitting in front of me here on our coffee table here in the studio belonged to Glenn Doherty. His nickname was Bub. I did 2 platoons with him. And his childhood best friend and another colleague of theirs, Sean is the best friend, TJ is their colleague, started Bub's Naturals, which is a collagen and MCT oil company in Bub's or Glenn's honor. And, for me, it's an absolute honor to be sponsored by and working with a company that, was started in the honor of one of my closest friends and a guy that I went to war with. And, the Bub's brand is not only super quality, collagen powder as well as MCT oil powder, but they also give back to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. They donate proceeds from their product sales to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, which, to me just furthers, the mission set on Veterans Day. They give 100% back. So, I do believe it's the best collagen on the planet. I like to mix it in with morning coffee. The MCT oil powder, the same thing. Mixes in very easy. It tastes great, and it just kind of adds everything that you want to start your day off from a brain health standpoint, from joint support, gut support. MCT oil and collagen are 2 components, especially as we age, that are integral components to health. And so to be able to work with Bub's Naturals and be able to work with them and sponsor a product that, number 1 is a high quality product, and number 2 is so near and dear to my heart and to the Mic Drop podcast for who it was started for and what it stands for. It's just it's an amazing place to be. So it is Whole30 approved. It's sports certified, so you're not going to run into any problems with that. And I will say that right now they're offering 20% off if you go to bubsnaturals.com and use the Mic Drop code. So I really highly encourage you to try it out, incorporate it into your day-to-day for joint health, for brain health, for cognition, for gut health, and to support an amazing organization that does a lot of things in Glenn Bub's honor. So go to bubsnaturals.com. Mic Drop is the code, 20% off. The ice bath cold plunge first thing in the morning, that augments cortisol spike, right, in a good way first thing?
It gives you a cortisol spike. I don't do it first thing in the morning, though.
So how long are you waiting before you jump in there?
At least a good hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm not like first when I wake up and I feel a little bit groggy right in the morning, and it takes me about a good 30 minutes, but typically it's about a good 30 minutes before you get that cortisol response anyway.
So what does the first hour of your day look like?
So one of the things I stopped doing actually 6 months ago was even setting an alarm.
Really? Mm-hmm. So how'd you make it here on time? No, I'm kidding.
Well, my body, I've just learned, naturally wakes up within a certain window. But I think talking a little bit about my own burnout and running a business and doing all of these things that I love, I work from home too. That's definitely helped, where I know a lot of people don't have the ability to work from home and kind of set their own schedules. But having that alarm set for myself, it was interfering a lot with me getting good quality of sleep. And I had to start thinking about sleep as actually being part of my business investment, because I'm the very driven woman. I'm type A. I will get things done right away, and I'll put a lot of pressure on myself. So actually me getting rid of an alarm allowed me to wake up when my body naturally wanted to wake up, which is usually between 5 a.m. and 5:45 a.m.
Really?
Pretty consistently.
Do you subscribe to the completely darked out room? Where,
Blackout.
So the sun...
Earplugs, all of it.
Oh, wow. So the sun isn't going to wake you up because it's not getting in yet.
But you'll see like the sun around like the cracks of the windows, and that's normally a sign. And I have trees covering my entire backyard, so the birds actually wake me up most of the time, and that's why I have to sleep with earplugs.
Yeah. I actually don't set an alarm normally either, other than, there's times
where like you have to, like a flight and things like that. So I let my body wake up naturally, and that's been like one of the best things I could have done for my energy and my mental health, actually.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, mine's a fair bit later. It's like 6:30 to 7 most mornings, I would say. But are you a hard line in bed by a certain time also?
Yeah, usually I'm winding down by 8 p.m. and I'm asleep by 9.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's so
not always too. Like there's always like those things that come up in evening times and events and dinners and where I don't get to go to bed. And my body still wakes me up typically between that 5:45 period. Regardless, which sometimes sucks because, I traveled this last weekend and there were some nights I didn't go to bed till like midnight or 1. And I'm like, all right, we're up. And it's, 5:15 in the morning. But
so most nights you're getting close to 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Age-related issues. Do you take, how big of a factor is somebody's age when they come into your practice, depending on what they're looking at?
It definitely plays a role. I'd say metabolically, we see a lot more issues with, older age. And I'd say the majority of people we work with are age like 40, 50 or so, typically fall into that age range. But, we work with a lot of women as well. And some of the biggest things that we see is a lot of that insulin resistance and inflammation, but actually often a byproduct of low skeletal muscle mass that we see quite a bit. And, one of the biggest piece of advice that I could give to like any women and men, but women in particular who are entering into the age of menopause, like that client type who's like, I can't lose weight despite, eating as little as possible and doing a bunch of exercise, and, we get their labs back and they're inflamed and they have some insulin resistance and they're like, I don't get it. I don't know why. It's really been a byproduct of not focusing on building skeletal muscle mass throughout their entire life. And after the age of 30, we see an average of a 3 to 8% decline in skeletal muscle mass per year.
Oh, in women or period?
In women, in particular.
3 to 8% per year after 30.
After the age of 30.
Wow.
If they're not focusing actually on skeletal muscle mass.
Right. A little bit unrelated, but I've seen you post about it a few times. Are you completely anti-birth control?
I wouldn't say I'm anti-birth control, but I am pro-optimal health. And birth control is not conductive for optimal health. It's not.
Do you put it into the category of chemical castration? It kind of is, right?
It is. And it's unfortunate too, because we tell women it's this miracle pill and it's going to fix all of your hormone issues. And we actually tell women that it's going to balance their hormones, or that's a lot what's out there. I know for me, when I got on it when I was a teenager, it's like, it's going to give you clear skin. It's going to balance your hormones. You'll have an easy period, menstrual cycle. You don't have to worry about it. And there was a point in my life where I just was like, I kind of wonder what it would be like, because I don't really know myself, like with like my actual hormones. And I came off of it and I started to deal with what I found out was post-birth control syndrome. My skin flared up. I had a lot of acne again. I actually didn't have a menstrual cycle for 3 months even after I came off. I had a lot of anxiety. And I had to really work on then about balancing my hormones, but it led me to this research more about female hormones and birth control and how birth control, how it really is negatively impacting not just our female hormones, but our entire body. You know, there was even some really interesting studies about how women who are taking oral contraceptives actually preferred feminine facial features in men.
Yeah.
So it affected their mate selection.
Yeah, I saw that same thing, which, you know, to me stands to reason. If you think about, like, say, from the 1950s to now, the preference in more of an emasculated man, you know, women, the reality is women dictate how guys behave, you know, I mean, because they're the gatekeepers, if you will, to what men want, right? And so if they go down this path of selecting more effeminate men are going to inherently become that way because, you know, from a mate selection standpoint, which is pretty fucking scary, really. But if you look at, you know, the shift that's taken place in Western society over the last 100 years.
There are more feminine men.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Like, I'm dumbfounded at how, I've mentioned this a few times. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but like when I grew up, you know, in the 80s, like the action flick, like the role models that boys my age had were Rambo, Commando, you know, G.I. Joe. It was like tough AA personality dudes that didn't take any shit, that had big jaws and, you know, I mean, like, and didn't fuck around. And now, like, when you look at pop culture and the influences that are there, it's a stark contrast from that. I mean, that type of Rambo essence is demonized, you know. So I guess, you know, for anybody listening, not that there's a huge woman demographic in terms of the mic drop listenership, but
men should know about this too, because
agreed.
I mean, for their women in particular.
Yeah. So what's the balance then? I mean, because not to get way off into the weeds and turn it into a sex podcast, but I mean, you know, if not getting pregnant is a priority, you know, I think the best description of couples who practice the pull-out method are called parents, is it doesn't work. You know, so what?
Well, cycle tracking, you know, guys, track your woman's cycle or help them learn more about their cycle. And I'm blown away how many women don't actually know what's happening during their cycle. Yeah. Like, they know nothing about their body at all. It was something that I remember even learning about, like, as an adult in my 20s. And I'm like, I didn't know this, right? And we're taught that, you know, these hormones are just about even to pregnancy and creating a baby, but there's also so many other benefits. So progesterone that women have actually act on GABA receptors in the brain. GABA receptors is what is acted on by Xanax, Valium. So it's an anti-anxiety hormone. So, you know, if your woman is struggling a lot with anxiety and poor sleep and mental health, you know, she's getting this synthetic type of progestin often in hormones, and she's not actually getting the benefits of the bioidentical hormone progesterone. Also, too, if your woman suffers with libido, sex drive, birth control kills female libido. So we see a decrease in testosterone. We see an increase in something called sex hormone binding globulin. So it's binding up all of the testosterone. So it's not even just that you can't get pregnant because you're not producing any of your hormones, basically putting you into a menopause range with your actual hormones, but it's also killing the woman's libido, where she's like, I don't even want to have sex anyway. Doesn't even sound great. But, you know, women can only get pregnant typically 5 days out of the month. There's 5 days. And if we were to learn how to track our cycles, so, you know, day one is the first day we get our period, not to go too in depth because I know there's a lot of guys on here, but it's important for them to know. Most women will ovulate typically around days 12 to 14 or so. And then for a 28-day cycle, you know, it'll start all over again. But there's just that window around ovulation, maybe a couple days before and a couple days after, where a woman can actually get pregnant. And I know for myself, I used to believe like, oh, you can get pregnant anytime during the month. That's actually not true. So by practicing something called fertility awareness method and women actually tracking their cycles, knowing when they're ovulating, you know, this is a much better form of birth control. So it's like, okay, pull-out method, you know, or using a condom during just that ovulation window, but the rest of the month.
Yeah, have at it.
Have at it.
All right. I mean, that is for sure good to know. I guess, with birth control being as, I would say, detrimental as it is, why does it seem like so few people realize how significant it is? Because to me, I kind of would view it as similar to, say, like really nasty preservatives, right? Is that like if something that you're putting in your body is so powerful that it keeps you from being able to reproduce, which is arguably mankind's primary goal, it's the survivability of the species. So it's inhibiting that. Like that has to be ridiculously powerful and can't be good for you. Same with like if you're putting a chemical on meat that's so nasty that the natural process of bacteria growth says, fuck that, I'm not touching it. That can't be good to put into your body. So both of those things, like why from your perspective and what you do for a living, is there such a mental disconnect? Is it a marketing thing?
I think how it's been framed for most women in two ways. I think one, birth control has really been framed as female empowerment quite a bit, of like, I want to be able to live my life, live it on my terms, and not have to ever worry about getting pregnant. So we framed it as woman empowerment as a society. And I'm, again, all for women being like, hey, I'm not ready to have kids yet. I want to go pursue my dreams. Hey, that's me over here. But what they're not educated on is all of the negative side effects of what they're doing for their body. They're only taught about the benefits, clearing your acne, not having to worry about cycle, have sex whenever you want, don't have to worry about getting pregnant. Like that's all that's taught. And I think that's why women are so blown away when they actually hear about a lot of these side effects. And when I post about it online, I get a lot of women who are actually upset and angry. And they're like, how could you say that? That's not woman empowerment to talk about. I'm like, no, what I'm talking about is the education side of this, of actually knowing what it's doing in your body and then make a decision. But have all of the information to be able to make a decision. And most women do not have all of the education. And then I think too, I think women have also been taught that having a period is something that is disgusting and dirty. And it's really unfortunate because we've been taught to actually reject a part of ourselves. And we as women do it, we're like, oh man, my period, all this. And guys are like, oh, she's PMSing and all this. And there's like a negative frame put around it. So we're like, okay, this is a great way to basically get rid of it completely. But what's empowering is actually being able to learn to work with the female cycle, because there's actually different energetic shifts that a woman goes through every single month. And I like to think about it like how cool, like what God created in a woman, that, her hormones and the things that are changing over the course of a month. Like most studies even done in terms of like nutrition and metabolic health are usually done on men or postmenopausal women. Actually, they're very rarely done on cycling women, because a lot of the researchers actually look at it as being way too complicated. And that's what's approach is given in the View to a lot of it. Like, this is too complicated. I don't want to have to deal with it. But what if we could flip the switch and look at it more from, what if I can learn to work with this and really be able to tap into the power that it offers?
Yeah. Knowledge is power, right? Amen. We're bouncing around a little bit here, but there's just a lot of topics I'm curious to get your take on. Cognition and brain health. I know we talked a little bit about EPA and DHA and omega-3. And is there anything else that you would add to kind of the brain health regimen of things to make sure you're either eating or supplementing?
Anything that affects blood flow is going to affect the brain. So even for guys listening, if you struggle with blood flow issues anywhere throughout your body,
so Viagra,
ED, you can know right away that you're struggling with blood flow to your brain, because it doesn't really just happen in one isolated area usually. So working on blood flow to the brain is one of the best things that we can do. Ginkgo is actually a great supplement. I started taking that myself. It's also one of the other reasons why exercise is so beneficial for brain health, because you actually start to get blood flowing and going to the brain quite a bit.
I just realized you didn't completely answer the first hour of the day.
First hour, yeah.
You talked about when you got up and why, but if we can talk about, go back to that real quick.
Yeah, so we talked about I don't set an alarm anymore. Usually, I mean, the first thing I do is I drink 2 glasses of water because your body is dehydrating all night long. So I drink a bunch of water right when I wake up, get that in. That's also a great way to wake up your organs, your brain, everything else, because dehydration, talking more about brain health, is one of the biggest things that can play a role in cognitive decline as well, too, brain fog throughout the day. So hydration. I then go into typically some kind of mindset work. And this is for me has shifted over the years. Right now, it's a bit more of a meditation practice that I have. I'll have a little bit of matcha and then I'll do 30 minutes meditation. Sometimes it's more visualization. Sometimes it's me just literally sitting there drinking my matcha tea and like listening to more meditation music. Sometimes I'm under my red light. Sometimes I'm doing journaling, but I give myself a good 30-minute period to really just sit with myself. And I started to do that because, you know, it's easy to just get up and go into go mode. My body just doesn't operate that way. It takes me like at least a good 30 minutes to wake up. So it allows me to like get still, be very intentional with my day, how I want to feel, instead of just going more into reactionary mode throughout the day. And then the second thing I do is always some kind of movement. So right now it's getting outside, going for a short run. Definitely focus on weightlifting. I have a little in-home gym in my garage. So I'll go for a run. I'll do some weightlifting, come back, maybe jump in my ice bath or just take a cold shower and then get into my day.
Yeah. With the ice bath or cold shower, do you notice a significant difference not doing it versus doing it?
I feel like I do. And I actually do more ice baths now midday in between my work calls that I have versus just always in the morning. And the biggest thing that I notice for me is more so just like mental clarity, going back to that.
Yeah.
You know, it wakes me up right away. And 2, it's really good for calming anxiety levels. So midday sometimes, like if I just want to wake up, I'll just jump in the ice bath and jump out. It's like better than any cup of coffee that you could have.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you can get up to like that 2-3 minute mark, it sucks. But then after, there's a really good just calming effect. I think I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is accurate at all, but it said that, you know, a 3-minute ice bath is equivalent to doing 2 hours of meditation.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, I do the cold shower every morning, which this time of year in Texas, 20 seconds maybe of legit cold water, and then it's just not.
And then it's warm water. Yeah.
Well, it's not cold.
For me, it's like 2 seconds in the shower, so it's really like and then you got to you're good.
Yeah, I mean, mine I get a good 20 seconds. In the wintertime, it's fucking freezing. You know, and I have a pool, so.
What benefits do you see from it?
You know, for me, it's more it's almost like a sense of euphoria afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, even with the amount of time that I spent, you know, being in cold, shitty water and whatever, to me, it's not something you really get used to, kind of, or you never look forward to it. And so for me, it's the second I get up, like the very first thing I do is get in a cold shower. And in the wintertime, it's tough. There's times, especially this past winter, where we got some gnarly storms where the pool was like half frozen. So I'd actually go get in the pool because it was really cold.
And you're awake, I bet, right after
that.
that.
For sure, yeah. But for me, it's more the mental hurdle that, not that it's like I'm having a real hard time doing it. I don't want to do it, and I do it. And so it kind of sets the tone. For me, it's more of a mental thing. Like, I feel good physically, and there's kind of that awake and calmness and whatever. I wouldn't say I really have a lot of issues with stress making me feel overwhelmed or anxious or any of that. I think just very fortunately never really had a lot of trouble with that. But yeah, so for me, it's more of kind of the psychological component to it that I find makes me feel really good because I did it. Mm-hmm. So now it's like, okay, that's out of the way. Kind of like working out first thing in the morning. It's like, okay, that's done. I don't have to worry about it now. And so for me, that's the thing. But with this summer, this is the first summer that I've been doing it the entire summer. I started the first day of the year. And so for the first few months, the shower was great because it was still really cold. But I'm looking at getting some sort of plunge. Or do you use the plunge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a 2-person plunge.
Yeah. There's a lot of different brands out there. I mean, from your experience with it, maintenance-wise, is it not a big deal? Like you're not having to drain it and clean it?
Mm-mm. Ours does oxygen.
Oh, okay.
And we had to drain it a couple times, but it's more so if you don't rinse off before getting in.
Oh, I gotcha.
Because like I'll come back from like a run and be like, all the sweat and take my shoes off in the backyard and have dirt on the bottom of my feet and get in the ice bath.
So it turns into a saltwater plunge.
Yeah.
A little sweat. That's good stuff. Again, with the cognition, you talked, I know we're bouncing back and forth again. I want to go back to the cognition thing. You mentioned ginkgo. Are there any other foods or supplements that are particularly advantageous for cognition?
Vitamin D. And we see a lot of people who are low in vitamin D. Probably the second most common deficiency we see outside of omega-3 fatty acids. Vitamin D is crucial for mental health. The omega-3s, ginkgo, working a bit more on blood flow. And then what else? B vitamins can also be pretty beneficial as well too.
Foods or supplement, you just take vitamin B like 12 or what?
Typically, you can do a methylated type of B vitamin. So, talking a little bit more about inflammation, and not going too in the weeds too about this, but methylation is a process in our body that helps with detoxification. It helps deal with inflammation. It does over 300 different types of processes in our body. And we test for something called homocysteine quite a bit, and it's a marker for inflammation. And when that's a bit high, we typically know that somebody needs to have a specific type of pre-methylated B vitamins. It's a very common genetic issue that somebody can have where they're not methylating very well. So supporting methylation with some pre-methylated B vitamins can also be pretty beneficial for mental health.
Oh, okay. Is the Metagenics brand, do they make everything? Like, are you a big fan of theirs, or do you have a lot of different brands depending on what the supplement is?
We have a lot of different brands. They're all pharmaceutical, high quality brands that we use that are typically partnered with different types of functional medicine practices.
That you can only get.
Metagenics is one of the big ones. We use Quicksilver Scientific quite a bit. So they make a lot of different liposomes. They do a lot of different things towards cognition as well, a lot on detoxification, liposomal glutathione, NAD. Those can be used quite a bit. There's a lot on NAD too for supporting, mental cognition. That's also like an area I'm continuously trying to explore and optimize a bit more. It's like, what is the best hack to like just be like superhuman basically every single day? Like that's my goal. Actually, MCT oils have been really beneficial for me. So going back to more like a nutrition hack. So I will backload my carbohydrates typically to later in the day. I can't go low carb, and I wouldn't want to anyway, just with how much I train. And women, it affects them a bit more negatively. But I do see a benefit when I'm not having my carbohydrates in the morning, and my diet is typically more protein and fats. And then I'll maybe do a little bit of fasting in the morning, but not too long, because if I fast too long, at least for me, I tend to get the opposite effect, so big cortisol spike, and then it's not beneficial because I'm more prone to blood sugar drops. But a little bit of MCT oil, coconut oil in my coffee, one of the best things for mental clarity for me. Yeah.
And I guess so you mentioned Quicksilver, Metagenics. Is there
Designs for Health is another one we use. And then, probiotics. There's a lot of different probiotics, and we didn't even get to talk about this, but something I'm really excited about right now is psychobiotics in particular. And you could say it's more for like mental clarity and focus, but it's just really geared towards all around mental health. And they're doing a lot more research on strain-specific probiotics that actually can help for anxiety and depression. And they've done some studies about strains of bifidobacterium and lactobacillus that actually work as effective as Lexapro.
Oh, wow.
Or an SSRI in treatment for people with depression.
Wow, that's fascinating. Is that something that you guys are currently prescribing or giving to your patients, or are you?
Some psychobiotics for sure.
What example of a psychobiotic do you guys give?
With a company called Claire Labs that we use, there's one called Target GBX, and it's a combination of different types of probiotics. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but different types of bifidobacterium, lactobacillus that tend to help support the gut-brain axis.
Oh, okay. So with Clara Labs, Quicksilver, Metagenics, and Design for Health, can anybody order that stuff, or do you have to be?
Yeah, I'll give you all of my links.
Okay.
They can order them through me.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Mushrooms. Are you a fan of, not the psilocybin type, that's a whole different podcast, but the normal ones that you would eat,
Like
or powder
reishi,
form,
ashwagandha,
lion's mane.
I am a fan of those. Yeah. And that's another good one that you bring up. So lion's mane also.
Yeah.
That's one I really, really like for mental clarity. Lion's mane, reishi, more for relaxation. So a lot of these actually paired with adaptogens as well. So ashwagandha is one of my favorite adaptogens that can be used. There's things like, I'm blanking on some of the names here.
Did you forget to take your ginkgo this morning?
I know. But adaptogens and some of these mushrooms are really great for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to think the name of the mushroom that's in, have you seen the show The Last of Us? Have you watched that? No. I can't think of the name of the mushroom, but that whole series is fascinating. But I guess if you haven't seen it, you wouldn't get it. I'll drop it. But any brands of mushrooms that you recommend, or
I'm still playing around a little bit with them. I don't have a very specific brand that I've used currently.
Okay.
With the mushrooms. Do you have one you use?
So I put lion's mane in my coffee every morning,
Yeah.
and it's a brand called Terrasoul, which has a lot of good reviews on Amazon, which is what I based it off of, which I don't know how, it's not exactly scientific, but because I'm sure that can be bought anyway. But
There's some really cool research around lion's mane, though, and I'm even going through more of like a SIBO type certification right now just for continuing education, and they even talk quite a bit about lion's mane and its benefits for healing the gut lining as well, too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, mushrooms are really remarkable. I guess, would you consider them vegetables? I don't know. Maybe.
Fungi.
Really fun guy. I mean, it's kind of absurd the amount of benefits that so many of them have. It's fascinating. But books wise, for your average not in the weeds layperson, is there a book or books that you'd recommend that gives kind of almost a synopsis on what we've talked about today?
I feel like a lot of my knowledge I've just accumulated from so many different places.
Have you thought about writing a book that synopsizes everything? Yeah,
because I'm launching a functional nutrition certification here actually at the end of this year.
Oh, cool.
So there's 2 tiers. Tier 1 is really for anybody because, as I shared at the beginning of this podcast, we've had so many people that's gone through my practice and it's been life-changing for them. And it's actually given them the idea and the inspiration to want to help other people. Now, not everybody can do all of the testing, so I created a functional nutrition, which is nutrition for gut health, for hormones, for thyroid, for mental health, all of that. And then I have tier 2, which is just available for registered dietitians and nurse practitioners, which does encompass a lot of the lab testing side. So basically I have written a book because after I put all of this together, it was probably well over 100 hours of content in that. So my goal is to create a book about healing, what it really does take to heal. Because, even for myself, and I know on our last episode, I talked a little bit about my own journey, and people could look at my life and be like, there's no way I should be where I'm at. But I've been so focused and so adamant on my healing. And I've done so many different things. And, I focus a lot on the functional medicine thing, side of everything. But healing for me has also been in a lot of other different areas too. Yeah. A lot of the other deep inner work between therapy, between working with coaches and, I look at it more from a holistic standpoint. So, there is a book for sure in me that encompasses the physical, the functional medicine side, how everything is really interconnected, how everything influences everything, but then also to, more so the mental and the spiritual healing, and then sharing my own story in that journey.
Yeah. So I guess there's one in the works.
There's one in the works. It's in here. The course is step 1. And
there's not one that you'd recommend that you've read otherwise?
That encompasses everything. There's been pieces that I've really enjoyed. So in meditation, in that area, Dr. Joe Dispenza, I like a lot of his books. Dr. Ruscio has some really good books on gut health. Dr. Pimentel, both of those books are really, really great. Hormones, Dr. Jolene Brighton, she talks a lot about birth control, so like Beyond the Pill is actually one of her books. So I always guide a lot of my clients over to her book who are thinking about coming off of birth control, and they're like, what other options are there that are non-hormonal? Beyond the Pill is awesome. She also has some other great books on female hormones. So a lot of these people, they're like experts in their zone of field. So I've read a lot of different books. I feel like there's not someone who's like wrote, I don't know, like a functional medicine textbook. And I don't feel like for most people that would be very enjoyable to read.
I think, if you could take, kind of the overarching, all the different topics that we've talked about today and put it in
about a lot.
Yeah, but, put it in a very digestible, no pun intended, manner where it's not like so far in the weeds where you're like, fuck, I don't even know what they're talking about, because a lot of the stuff, I think most people don't need to know maybe the mechanisms of how things work. I mean, I think it's important to understand, a basic concept of why things are bad and what they do to your body, so you understand, in those times where maybe you're having an urge, if you know like how detrimental it is, maybe it's easier to stay away from it. But I think, that's the key really, is just kind of do an overview of everything and, almost like a principled approach to it where it's not, 600 pages of, scientific.
Actually, a really good book that was all-encompassing, Sean Stevenson, Eat Smarter. Mm-hmm. He has a pretty good book. His Audible is awesome. He's pretty funny in it, breaking down a lot in nutrition, even a little bit on lab testing side. Still a little bit more advanced, but he does a good job. And he also has another book called Sleep Smarter.
Oh, cool.
That he came out with that
Sean
goes
Smith?
into Sean Stevenson, The Science of Sleep.
Okay, great. All great recommendations. Anything that we didn't talk about that we should have?
I feel like we talked about a lot in all different areas of functional medicine and health.
Well, good. Well, it's always a pleasure having you on here. We sure appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure we'll have you back again, especially if you do write that book. I do have a parting gift for you for being on the show here. At some point, I need to see the one that's in the box.
Thank you.
Post a picture with you rocking.
This is awesome.
So one is the standard coin, and then
all right.
Since you're in Texas, you got to rock the belt buckle. So
it's a belt buckle, yeah. See, I'm wearing fake jeans right now. Yeah. These aren't even real pockets. Well, so I have to get some real jeans to put these on. I wear jeggings.
Well, if you find yourself in a real pair of jeans, it'd be awesome to have a picture posted of you rocking the mic drop buckle.
I'm gonna do it.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming. It's always a pleasure having you. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is all important stuff, and I think it's easy to not pay attention to little things that you put in your body or that you don't do that can make a huge difference. So we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise as always.
Thank you for having me back on.
Absolutely.
Enjoyed it.
If you didn't enjoy it, feel free to choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.